Okay, so we'll start to talk about contracts and switch gears a little bit and about project delivery. And so what we're looking at in terms of contract, sorry, is what is the essence of a contract? So uh, the AIA has their own contracts, but a firm, can also write up their own contracts. So there's nothing to say that you have to use the AIA contracts. You can make your own. But in any type of contract, no matter what, I mean, even if it's outside of architecture, a contract should consist of the scope of work, the cost of work, and the time. And those three items are referred to as the essence of a contract. And this is, again, one of those questions that you'll most likely see on the exam, because they want to make sure that you understand, that the essence of the contract is really about scope, cost, and time. Or in other words, what is the scope covered? What is the project? What is the program? What is the task at hand really? What will it cost? So it's important to put a number in there, because that's what you're sticking to. That's what you're trying to meet, and how long it'll take. And so it could be a design time. It could be with the contractor about construction time. But those three things are really the most important and to include in the contract, which is why they're called the essence of the contract. I have this little side note here. I have been working on a lot of contracts myself lately and trying to improve them in my own professional work. And in my experience, and I'm always about sharing my own experience. Like I said, I've have about 22 years of experience in the profession. I started early, and not to say I'm a spring chicken still, but I did start pretty much right out of my first year of architecture school. So I've had a lot of experience. But in my experience, a bad contract gets you into trouble every time, every time. And it is so important to be thorough and clear. And the danger of a contract is that it can actually have a lot of gray area. But that just takes practice, it takes time, it takes testing, and it takes experience to figure out and to look at these, contracts, and be able to point out where those gray areas are so that you can make them black and white, and that you can make them succinct and concise, and you have a clear contract. What is really unfortunate, and again, I have seen this, firsthand many times, is, that's usually where the trouble starts. And it creates a really bad or untrusting relationship with the client. And that's never good. As much as you have the best intentions in the beginning, and nobody, maybe you go through the contract and nobody realizes at first. Down the line, it's going to kind of catch up to you, and it's going to start to create, some sour grapes and some sour tastes in people's mouths, and it does catch up with you. So just make sure, that again, you are very clear on what is the scope of work, what is the cost of work, and what's the time. There's a lot of projects where they might not know, what exactly they want. But, again, if you have that conversation up front, and you come to an agreement that, let's say we'll put in this mechanical system now as part of the scope, it can change later. But as long as everybody knows that a mechanical system is being considered, then that's really, what you should be, putting in the contract. Because again, if you don't put it in at all, and the owner, let's say, was expecting a mechanical system later on and is not getting it, and realizes that nobody really addressed that issue in the beginning with the contract, then, like I said, it just creates this really bad taste in people's mouths later on. You can choose to use a standard AIA contract. So the AIA does provide these really awesome contracts. They're very thorough. They're very time tested. We will talk about them a lot. or you can create your own, as I said. And creating your own is, it's a bit of an art form. It takes practice. It takes, stumbling so that you know what not to do in your next iteration, in your next go around. Eventually you'll get there. You can use others as a basis for it. Whereas, the AAA contracts are many. There's a lot of them for every single situation there is out there. And they're very, very thorough. The only problem my experience with them is that smaller firms, they tend to be more cost prohibitive. Although that's something that should be absorbed, really in the project fees. I tend to find that a lot of the smaller firms just make their own because, they're not cheap, but they do have their advantages as well. And that's also what's also noted as a link where you can have access to the AAA contracts. And so the examples that I'm going to show you are from the AIA's website, their AAA contracts. What they will give you is, with each contract, they give you a free sample. And it's not necessarily a sample per se, because it actually is the full document. It's just not filled in. And it has, the sample watermark on it, but you can actually read them thoroughly and see how they start to set up the relationships. Those absolutely you should look at and read thoroughly, 5 times to make sure that you understand them, because they will ask questions about relationships on the exam. Like I said, as an exam tip, that oftentimes they do include the contracts as part of the case studies, and they are searchable, and you can go back and kind of check your answers in that way. However, it's good to know off the top of your head so that you're not spending all of that time trying to search those documents, where you could be spending probably more time on those case studies.